Hello, so welcome to the first in the Unhinged podcast series. Today we're going to talk about the Unhinge, which is my first ever book. So my name's Craig Scoular, I'm the author of the book, and I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Dougie Marks, who's going to talk with us a wee bit about some of the themes of the book, the characters, and give his insight. So hello, Dougie.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Hi, how you doing?
So, in the essence of full disclosure, Dougie and I are obviously, as well as Dougie being from, well, you can tell a bit more about what you do, but we are extremely old friends.
Yeah, we go back to before I can remember.
Yeah, well, we grew up living in the house next to each other.
Yeah.
So I suppose going back to birth.
Yeah,
which is why you can't remember it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I've gone through what's quite nice about the fact that we're both in our 40s and still friends is I always think is like that. When you're young, you get forced to be friends with people because it's the people who live closest to you.
It's just proximity and nothing else. Yeah.
Or your mum's friends with their mum.
Aye.
So the fact that it evolved through different stages of playing with Play-Doh, then Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
That's right. Yeah, and then football, and then
music.
Yeah, music. Yeah. All that kind of stuff the whole way through.
And now to being supposed to be serious adults,
being old men.
Sometimes.
That's right. Yeah.
So I don't have much to say about me other than I've written this book. We'll talk more about where it came from and stuff. But my primary job is I'm a teacher of modern studies, and if you're listening outside Scotland, that's just like politics and social issues and stuff, because I don't think modern studies anywhere out with Scotland. And yeah, that's it.
And you're also in charge of kind of social subjects more generally in the school, aren't you?
But no one really cares about that. They just want to know. I work in a school. That's my real
Fair
job.
enough.
That's the one that pays the bills. Yeah. And Dougie?
So I'm a psychologist. Yep. I work did a couple of different things. My main bread is working for Glasgow Glasgow University, to give it its proper name. I do teaching on psychology, I do research as well, and I also work clinically as well as a therapist. So most of my kind of stuff is looking at kind of psychology and health and that kind of thing. But I've also got a background in English. So my first degree was in English.
Yeah. So this is
English literature. So I've got a little bit of a.
So you're almost like the perfect guest to have on this to talk to, because you've got the literature background, and you've got insight into the psychology, some of the.
Well, I guess we'll see if I can offer something useful.
Yeah. So
right.
Really,
so I want to ask you first of all, right? So, right, why did you decide to write a book?
I don't know. Why this? I don't know. Can you ever pinpoint the moment? I don't know. Like
when did you start?
Did you remember the pinpoint moment you were going to be a psychologist or something? I don't know. Like why? So I don't remember the exact moment. Probably two things. Actually, you're part of this. I'm going to tell you.
Oh right, okay.
I've not told you so far.
I didn't know this.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you this. So two things. One was like I love art in the form of media. So like I like podcasts. I like books.
Yeah.
Particularly like films. I like some TV. Less so. I do like some TV, but generally I love films.
Yeah.
I love the idea of storytelling generally, particularly films that can tell a story in like 90 minutes or 100 minutes and have all of these things going on, and it's done and dusted, versus TV series that want you to take 75 hours of your life to tell one story. So I love that. So, but one of the frustrations sometimes when you're watching things is that, particularly in the genre that I decided to do something, write something, was like, I never always seen myself in stories. That's not to say this book is about me, and I'll come on to that, because that's the number one question.
People ask you that a lot, don't they?
Yeah. Was this about you? Is this your life? Is this your autobiography? And, obviously it's not, but in terms of like, you never see yourself as a, like what you do, like if you watch these films, they all have these ridiculous jobs.
They're all
film romantic comedy. It's like, yes, I deal in fine, architect. What do you call it? What's that?
Fine art.
That's it.
Yeah.
I'm a fine art dealer.
I'm a fine art dealer and a spy for the British government on the side.
I don't know anyone who's a fine art dealer. I've never met somebody who's a fine art dealer. I'm never likely to. So
most people work in offices,
or they live in these ridiculous flats with, and they have ridiculous conversations about ridiculous things, and and have sex with each other in ridiculous, in ways that don't represent what happens in real life. So I suppose I was trying to think about when, and I just got to that point where I was like, I don't know, maybe there's a different story, and I was inspired in a sense by, like, I don't know if you've ever read the Richard Osman books. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to be careful what I say here, because I don't want somebody to extrapolate and go, Scoular says he's like Osman, you know, because like, he sold like 1 billion books, and is fantastic. But I suppose his style of writing, if you've ever read his books, I don't know if you've had, like, they're so easy to read, like, and I don't think they're earth-shattering in terms of the themes that they discuss, but my goodness, you can read it in an afternoon. Like, they're so good. And when I read them, I was like, God, I really like that style. I've not really seen that similar style of someone writing conversationally almost. So I loved that. I liked that. And then I read a couple of books that were kind of set in around this area, and I suppose I just thought, you know, I have never written anything ever. I thought, well, why not? You know, like, everyone's got a story to tell. You know, like, why not tell a story? The second thing was, this would came out to you, like, you might remember, you came out and spoke to some of our school students about stress and anxiety and how to manage it. And you said something really, really, that's always stuck with me ever since that. And that was like 3 years ago or something, wasn't it? 2 or 3 years ago. The
first bit was pre-COVID, I think.
Yeah, but I think we spoke to students was, I can't remember, anyway, whatever it was. You said the kids talked about, you know, you were talking to the kids about stress and anxiety and all these things, and how you manage them. And you were saying one of the things that people don't do is take care of their mental health, or they take care of their physical health. Like, they will go to the doctors if they hurt their foot, or they'll do it, but their mental health is something that people just generally, maybe they're getting better these days, but generally it's the thing you ignore. You know, you'll do something about it when you recognise it's very poor, but you won't do the things to keep it healthy the way you would your body. Like, so you don't wait until you're extremely unhealthy to do something about it. You know, most people will try and be proactive. So you did that, and then you said something else that was really interesting. You said, and one way of doing that is set yourself a challenge. Do things that are difficult, but not too difficult you can't achieve. Too easy that you don't feel accomplishments from it. So I had got to a point in my life where I was at, I suppose, a bit of a crossroads in a number of different ways. And one of those things that I was grappling with was, like, what do I want to do? So I had gotten to a point where I was working very hard, and I'm okay at what I do. I'm not brilliant, but I'm okay at my job. You know, I do my job reasonably well. And then, you know, like, I wasn't unhappy, far from it. I was, you know, got a fantastic daughter, and, like, do lots of activities and watch football, and I was thinking, but that can't define me. Like, I've got to have something else. Like, what else can I do? Like, life's becoming a little bit too easy in the sense that I'm not out my comfort zone in any way. I'm not pushing myself anymore.
You'd mastered all these domains.
Some things, and I was like, and in terms of work, I wasn't really necessarily at the point, for different reasons, that I wanted to pursue it in the workplace. So I was like, well, where else do you pursue it? And before, I'd done football coaching, and I'd done quite well with that, and wasn't really interested to go back to that. So those two things came together at the right moment, and I thought, here's an opportunity. Like, you know, this is difficult, but it's not something I can't do. You know, I can write. I write emails all the time to people. I love telling stories, and I like, you know, doing that sort of thing. So I was like, maybe I could try it. And I sat down, and I opened up and realised very quickly that I couldn't, because in the first page that I wrote, I was like, what am I thinking? You know, like, people are like, a real author, like, you're not an author, come on. And I left it. I shut my laptop down, and that was it. And the next day, it was like a Friday. It was summer holidays, and I thought, no, like, I spend my entire life telling kids, don't give up. You can't give up with the first. Like, that is the thing I say over and over again, you know, like, growth mindset, etc. You just can't do it yet. And I thought, no, like, you can't give up. You can't write 1 page of A4 on a laptop and decide it's rubbish and stop forever. Like, just go back. Like, so what do you know? Write something you might know about. You know, make something you might be a bit more comfortable with. And the first few lines you read in Unhinge are the first few lines that came out that Friday. And then I just wrote, and before I knew it, I had like 15,000 words. And I went, if I was somebody reading that, it's not awful. It's not for everybody. It's certainly not for everybody. Some people, you know, will have, I'm sure, will go on to read it and not enjoy it and just give up after. Like, there's nothing worse when you see your track on Amazon and you realise someone's read like 10 pages and never read anything else. You're like, oh, it hurts me, you know. But then you remember, okay, it's not for everyone. There's certain genres I wouldn't read, or certain things I wouldn't like that other people love. So
you
that's
start
just
with something, and then,
So to go back to that, that's my answer. That's how it came about. And I suppose the lesson out of that is always like the mantra you gave. Like, and I think you also said, I remember you said to the kids that day, there's this really, you know, myth that, never quit, never give up, never quit. And you said something, you said, you must quit. Winners quit. Successful people quit. It's quitting the right things.
Yeah.
It's quitting. It's like, so, and that's what I was thinking, like, what can I do that I can be successful at? So it's not, I don't think the message is like everyone can sit and do something. There's some people who won't be able to write a book. There's some people who won't be able to do other things.
Well, you quit football coaching.
Yeah.
Because you got to the end of it and you thought, right, I'm kind of done here.
Yeah, exactly. So you quit certain things and you give up the things that you're not getting much back out of for different reasons, and you do something else. So, but I suppose that is, like, I'd like to think that the message for anyone is always like, whatever you can do, find something that you do. And the other thing, I think you said in terms of how do you know that you're mentally stimulated and your mental health as well, you said find an activity where you look at the clock and think, I can't believe that amount of time's passed. I think you said the same about relationships. Find a friend or a partner whereby you go, oh my God, is that chucking out time already? Rather than the person you think, oh my God, it's only been 5 minutes. And you're still, oh no, I'm going to have to get Alfie has a wee bit of that maybe with some of his conversations online.
And that's when you know you're in that space. That's when you know you're in the space of, right, I'm engaged in something that isn't so difficult that I'm never going to be able to do it, but it's not something
like you and I are a good example. Like, we're good friends, but the reality is how often do we sit and I go, geez, we better go. Because, you found someone that engages you.
And we talk.
And that's great. So I think that's one of the things you've always got to try and look for. And I certainly, when I'm writing, I can hours and hours and hours and hours can go by, and I don't even notice. Like,
you don't even see it.
I've not eaten. I've not been in the toilet. I've just been sitting writing because my head's in the story. And like, that's a wonderful thing to find. So whether it's good or not good, art is obviously, all forms of art are subjective, like, I would like to think some people find something in it. Well, yeah, thank you. But I like to think some people would like it, but mainly I wrote it for me in the sense that it was something to do that I can now say, I can do that. Like, will I go in and have a back catalogue of books? Probably not. I'm not sure I'm as talented to do that, but I did that period of time in it, and it reminded me that you can always do something new. You can always find something you're good at, that or you enjoy. Whether you're good at it or not, it's up to other people to decide. But something you really enjoyed it, and you might not have tried. So I think that's my proudest moment. Not that I've got a book or that anyone likes it. I don't think that's what I take pride in. I take the pride in the fact that I did something proactively that really stimulated me and really helped me, and something I really enjoyed. And so that was good. So that was the genesis of it.
Well, I can tell you that it is a book that some people like, which is good. I'm one of them. So let's get into it, right? So
let's go.
Yeah. Tell us about it. It's about Alfie.
Yeah, so Alfie's the main character. Obviously, like, I should have said it. Well, I shall say now, because maybe what I said there is no spoiler. And maybe you were listening to this thinking, I'm inspired. I'm going to go and...
Yep, that's fine. Yep.
I'm now inspired to go and, take up painting or something.
Yep.
But stop now if you've not read the book. Go into Amazon, buy it, or read it on Kindle Unlimited.
Unhinged, Craig Scoular.
Yep, you'll get it for $1.99 on Amazon. I mean, I often think when I see prices in shops, this is my thing. Every time I go to a shop, I think, God, you could get my book for that. That took me like 3 weeks, like, goodness knows, like 10 hours a day during summer holidays, like, and I'm selling it for $1.99, and look at that sweetie that Sophie wants it. It's like $2.99 and she's
£4.95 for a latte.
Exactly. So $1.99.
Or you buy two, buy one for $1.99 and buy one for your friend for $1.99 as well. It's still cheaper than a latte.
So stop, because we're going to talk characters, we're going to talk plot. So the main character in the book is Alfie, Alfie Anderson, and Alfie starts the book finding himself at the end of, or a year or two out from the end of a long relationship, a marriage, and
Alfie's 40, isn't he?
He's 40, I think the book's 42. So
when the book starts,
he's at an awkward age for starting again.
So he's not a young man.
And the tagline, who said moving on was easy?
Yeah.
Because I think we feel our whole life isn't like you're always moving on. Time's moving you on. Like, so there's a natural element to moving on. Like, we move through each day, we move through each period of our life, we move through periods of our kids' lives. We move on all the time, but actually, the process of that is, I think, can be quite tricky if you want to move on in the way that you're growing and that
definitely
you're happy and content. I think Alfie at the start of the book, he's not, and I think he decides. Page 1, line 1, that he's going to try online dating because he thinks the fix that he needs is someone else, but that's obviously that's the premise of the book, I suppose, is Alfie trying to find someone at this age, and online dating is I guess, a vehicle of which we explore his story. I don't think it's about online dating. I mean, it comments on online dating. I think if you've ever online dated, you would probably recognise the anxieties that he has in terms of creating a profile. And this idea he's obsessed with this idea of like what version of himself is out there, which is something I'd actually heard, quite a few years ago. And it was this idea that there are, essentially like if you meet 100 people, there's 100 versions of you that exist.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting
idea. If you
idea.
meet 1,000 people, there's 1,000 versions, because everyone takes something different away from you. Everyone's got a slightly different version. Like, you're funny to some people, you might be just annoying to someone else.
Yeah.
And obviously it's more complex than those basic emotions, but Alfie has this kind of, I guess, crisis of like, who am I? And this version he had with his wife that he loved. He loved, he says obviously towards the end of the book, one of the things, how did I know I was in love? Well, she made me feel a version of myself that I was in love with. Yeah. And he said, maybe that's a selfish way of looking at love, but that's how I felt it was love, that I've never felt and seen myself so like the way I did. And therefore he's grieving, we'll come on and talk about grief, because obviously it comes through the book a lot, but he's grieving the death of that version of himself at the start of the book. Yeah. And he's got to create this, and he's literally, when he has metaphorically got to get a new version of himself, he literally has to do it as well for this online dating site. He has to create a version of himself, like, here's what I like, here's what I do, here's a funny quip, here's pictures of me. So
have you had any feedback from people who have been in that online dating world and have had to navigate it? Like quite a few people. Interestingly though, more of the comments I get from people who haven't done it. To say it sounds horrific.
Who are like, I can't believe, like maybe older people who would have been
I've never done it.
Went about, and they were like,
I wasn't young when it was about.
Yeah, like this is a kind of, it was new to them, the idea of exploring it, and I hope I explore it in a way like people who have online dated have said to me, it's very realistic. Now everyone's experience of anything in life is different, so this is not a definitive version of online dating. Some people will go on, find the date, maybe night one, and that's it. And it's but great, I think for a lot of people on these things, they become quite addictive to an extent, because everyone wants to be liked. Everyone wants to be liked, there's an element of that, and there's nothing more terrifying than creating a version of yourself to put online, which is only really a very superficial version of who you are, and thinking that people are going, no. It's like, and you're like,
I don't know how anybody does it. It's just like,
perennial rejection that you don't even see, and I think there's one of my favourite moments in the book is when UJ talks about, the pool hall, and he's like, when we were young, you just went up to a lassie and went, you want a dance type of thing, and Alfie says, as brutal as that might have sounded, like having to go up, it's like so much better because you realise there and then they don't want you. He's like, rather than like they kind of,
rather than have it hanging over you all night.
Does somebody maybe like me?
Is anybody out there going to be liking me?
Or you meet someone and they ghost you. Like they delete your profile and you think, oh right, okay, like so
people who have or haven't experienced the online dating world will find a bit of it interesting, because
I think so. I think if you haven't done it, you probably like you were like, I can't imagine what it's like. So I hope that through Alfie's story you get a sense of what it might be like for one person, as I said.
And and I do not want to do it.
I don't think. But here's the thing about online dating. I don't think anyone wants to, particularly at our age, I don't think anyone wants to go doing any form of dating, whether that's hanging around the pub or going up and talking to people, whatever, like in nightclubs or places, because the reality is when you get to a particular age, those opportunities are scarcer. But regardless, even if they weren't, I don't think anyone really wants to put themselves back out at this point in their lives, because you've had a version of yourself for so long that you were quite settled with.
And poor old Alfie's got that problem.
And Alfie has, because the reality is, as I said, your version of who you are is only what other people take from you. So like Alfie's settled, and it's terrifying, the idea he's now got to go back out and find a new version of himself for someone else to love
and start again,
because the version of him that Heather loved is dead. To Alfie anyway. To Alfie. Now I don't know what you think on that. Is that something you think people do deal, maybe struggle with, particularly when they are at the end of a relationship or divorcing or something like that?
I think it must be difficult for people in the kind of middle years of life, which is, I guess, what we're kind of talking about with Alfie, where he's obviously had this before the book starts, we can tell that he's had some kind of paradise that he's existed in, where, you know, he's had Heather and he's got a version of himself, like you say, that is negotiated with her, and this is who he is, and this is who he sees himself as. And at the start of the book, that paradise has been shattered, you know, and he's now out in the wilderness a bit, where he's like, right,
and you also get like you only get the good things mainly the good things in the flashbacks, and I think that's what I wanted to try and showcase as well. Alfie is, and the word you used is, I think, it's perfect. He's reflecting on a paradise which didn't really exist to begin with. Yeah, because no one's marriage is a paradise. Because it does.
Does a paradise ever actually exist?
No, you don't get the arguments or the heartbreak until much later on in the book. His reflections are generally,
or not even just the arguments. You know, things like, you know, you don't get the, you know, toothpaste left in the sink, just the normal, not the normal annoyances of life.
He's reflecting on something, and actually, what you get the sense of is that his marriage wasn't paradise at all. In fact, actually, for a large part,
in as the book goes.
But actually, for a large part of his marriage, it was two people living together, not talking about something awful that had happened to them. You know, in terms of not being able to have kids.
Probably like quite a lot of marriages.
Yeah, they just don't communicate it until eventually it just breaks down altogether.
Yeah.
So you get the sense that actually this paradise that he looks back on, and all of his early memories, all his memories are of the early part of his marriage or earlier in the relationship.
Yeah, that's true.
You don't get them later on. You get the perfect version from the kind of honeymoon period years up until he moves into the house, and he actually says, I think, at one point, that was on reflection, that was the high point.
Yeah, and it's only later on in the end of the book where we get the very end of the marriage.
Yes,
which is obviously a lot darker.
Yeah, which is, you know, because one of the things, like, someone said to me was like, I think Heather was a bit overreacts a bit in terms of the thing, but it's like, no, but I wouldn't say you miss a point, because every reader takes from it what they want. Maybe missed my point, then maybe I didn't convey it as well to that person. But what I was hoping to get across was that was really just, that's the last act, you know, like Heather's just, it's just enough for it to say, look, why are we doing this? You know, like, if this is where we're at, like, why are we having this pretense anymore? And Alfie being Alfie likes to just kick problems down the street, you know, like, he doesn't want to deal with these problems that are facing him in his face. He's facing up to him, so he's quite happy just to kick them down. So the idea that his marriage is going along, they're earning nice money, they're living in a nice house, everything's happy to that extent, but actually in this other thing, there's this other area they're just not talking about anymore, and that's just festering away. So I don't think Heather leaves him because he kissed somebody on a night out. I think they can forgive that. I think there's an element of, she's like, well, I had this thing, and the one thing that was holding us together was the fact that maybe, like, at least I trusted you.
Yes.
You know, but like, now that's gone, what's left? Yeah. You know, like,
well, a relationship is like, you know, or anybody's kind of psyche, I guess, is a bit like, you know, it's like when you've got a bridge, but it's maybe got one crack in it somewhere, you know, and their relationship is, you know, it's like a stable bridge, but then there's this one crack, which is that they've never resolved this issue about fertility and things, you know, and then you go, well, when you put pressure on that bridge, it's going to crack at its weakest point, you know, so and then the pressure that he puts on it is when he kisses somebody on a night out, you know, and then the whole bridge collapses basically, you know, but it's not necessarily because of the pressure that was put on it, it's because of the crack that was
already there.
The crack that was in the structure that was already there.
And I think there's an element of, like, Alfie's dealing with that then, so he's got, I suppose, the themes then that emanate from that in the book. You've got regret, you have guilt, and you have grief, you know, I think, that are coming through, which sounds quite heavy in the sense that it's a romantic comedy, you know, I suppose, and there is obviously a lot of humour and lightness in it as well, but like I said at the start about a book, I didn't want it to be, I wanted it to be real. I wanted it to sit with people like you would recognise the characters, and one thing I think that I was proud of at the end was I was like, well, these characters are, and I hope people feel the same when they read it, or people listening, hope you felt this when you read it, was that the characters you could imagine, you'd say, well, I know someone like that, that's my uncle, or that's you know, that's like my mum says things like that or acts like that.
A good book has comedy and tragedy in it, and that's what it's got,
and that's what I tried to balance up. It was the realness, but also I didn't want the other side where it's like, you know, the romantic comedy where, as I said before, they all have ridiculous jobs and live in ridiculous apartments, and that's escapism.
It's more of a fantasy,
and that's great. Some people love that, you know, the idea they want to escape to something that they don't experience, and someone authors give them that and do fantastically well from it. But I'm not the guy with the chiseled jaw, sanding down the boat with his white shirt and the beach floats, and girl runs across him. That wasn't really the sort of thing that I was aiming for. It was much more like what would be real, and then what is real. Then grief is real. Like, we all deal with it, and not necessarily through always losing someone. We deal with grief all the time. Like, I was talking to, I'm got all these people's names out of this because I don't really feel it's my place to name them. Yeah. But I was talking to someone recently, and they were like, oh, like, my kid's going to high school, like, I just feel that part, and it was just pure grief.
Yep.
Like, it was just pure grief, and like, if he'd said to them, you're actually grieving, they'd be like, don't be so ridiculous.
And it's like, you are, yeah.
But it was totally, you had this big 10-minute chat to me about, I can't believe this is happening, they don't need me, and blah 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 blah. And it's like, you're going to need to move on, because that part of your life is done, like, that part is done, and you're grieving for the fact that your kid doesn't maybe rely on you as much as what it did before. So I wanted to write about real things. I think we all feel guilty all the time. We feel guilty about things we say to people we love. I think I also use Simon Mayo and Mark Kermode's podcast quite a lot because I love them. But they're my one of my greatest days ever, and I got to meet the pair of them.
Did you meet them?
Yeah, I think they were quite. I was like just staring at them, and then I got a picture of my arms around them, and because they're fantastic,
Shout out to Mark and Simon.
Yeah, they're so good. But what was I talking about there? What were you saying to me there?
Simon Mayo.
This is my age.
I know this is my age as well. We'll cut this bit.
No.
What were we saying?
This is real podcast and we can't remember. Anyway, but so we're talking about like
moving on
and things, and I suppose so that was what I was talking about. It's come back to me. This always happens. You should be trying to be a student in my class, by the way.
I'm the same. I'm the same. Students in my class.
I'll get the name of this politician in a minute. Wait a minute, it was Margaret Thatcher. It was too obvious. Anyway, one of the bits I use, obviously, I try and use Simon, particularly some of these confessions to try and bounce off in terms of what Alfie thinks about stuff, and you get like the early on, which is a bit of a plot spoiler that you might not recognise, is where the husband talks about moving down south. And he did the whole, it's a real confession, which is hilarious. I thought it was funny. When he moves down and tells his wife that he wants to move, and she's like, we're not moving till the kids are grown up, and he kid's on, he's got a job down there, and he's just made the whole thing up so he can move.
Literally made it up.
But then Heather says, I don't forgive him.
Yeah.
And I was just a wee nod to where I knew the story was going later on. The other one was about the sisters, the twin sisters, and one sister goes away. Yeah. And the other sister, which was I thought was a beautiful story, but through Alfie's prism, which is the mum is dying and she wants to see her daughter and the twin who's gone says, I'm not coming back. Yeah. So the other twin dresses up as her. Yeah. Yeah. And everybody in the studio, which is true, and I did as well, like, everybody's crying, thinking, what a beautiful story. Everybody. But I thought, wonder what Alfie would think about that. So I wrote the podcast story out, and I was like, what would Alfie think about that? And Alfie, of course, takes from that, people hurt people. Like his focus isn't on the beautiful action of the daughter.
It's a deception.
Not even as much about the deception, it's of the twin who wouldn't come back. Yeah. Like, who doesn't come back to see their dying mum. And Alfie's like, that's just a reminder that people hurt people. Yeah. And I think
even that close relationship.
And he's got this ingrained in him, this idea of like, people hurt you. Like, whether they want to, but there's good reasons for it not, people will hurt you in the end.
So Alfie's got this gap in his life, and then he has these various adventures.
He has the awful idea of going. So one of the other characters, of course, is Alan. So he has this awful idea that he's going to ask Alan for his help.
I like Alan.
I like Alan. Someone said to me they didn't like Alan.
Really?
Yeah.
Who doesn't like Alan?
Well, I'm not going to name them, but they were wrong.
You know who you are.
We all love Alan. I think
everybody needs an Alan.
Everyone knows an Alan.
Everyone knows an Alan.
Everyone knows an Alan. Alan is based on someone I met. Again, won't say, but and although there's elements of other people in Alan and some things made up, there's a person that I'll picture when I think about Alan sometimes. But Alan's like, you need an Alan because ultimately you need someone to bounce off. And what I like is, and again, I don't think you see it enough, which is those kind of really strong male relationships, male to male, and stories. And people who are listening to this will go, oh, I can name you 50. I don't know, and you're talking rubbish. But for me, I don't see it represented an awful lot.
Do you think this is a book then that? So it's interesting. So obviously, in some ways, you say, well, it's a romance book in some ways because it's about will this guy or won't he find love? But is it a romance book for guys then?
I don't think. No. So here's the thing, right? So
or maybe for guys as well as girls.
I think
because maybe what you're saying is that these guys aren't necessarily.
So I had some feedback early on when I was doing drafts, and someone said, like this is really only going to play to males. Well,
really?
It's like a male story. Like men are going to love this. Like and was
that person a man or a woman?
No, woman. And said men will love this. I'm not sure about your female readers though. And I thought, right, okay. I didn't write it with anyone
in mind.
Only write what you write, but actually, like the overwhelming people who've read it are women.
Yeah.
But the few men that have read it have really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And it's just that I think guys look at maybe that cover and maybe think romantic comedy and think I'm not going to read that. When actually, I think
if they do read it, I think what they'll find is that it is
totally identify.
It's relatable because you're like, I get what it's like to be a guy and having to negotiate all of these relationships with, not just the Hinge dates, but dates in general, and some of them are quite funny.
Your friendship
groups, Alan,
relatives.
Now the relatives. This is something that I wanted to talk to you about. So, we've got the Hinge side of it, and we've got the for Alfie, will he or won't he find romance, and we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
But you've also got these other kind of layers of relationships, and Alfie's certainly very involved with, if you could even maybe see quite close to his mum and dad.
Yeah.
So what's that about?
Certainly his mum. So, like...
He's certainly at his mum and dad's a good amount.
Because I think you realise he's not got an extensive friendship group, and obviously a lot of his life has been tied up in his wife and his marriage.
Yeah.
So the substitute for that for now has been, I suppose, he finds comfort.
Yeah.
Been back as much as they frustrate him.
Yeah.
Particularly his mum.
Yes.
And I wrote the mum, not with like, even you and I have talked, like you're like, oh, that's just like, some parts that are things that my mum would say. Yeah. I think anyone who lives in this part of the world would go, yeah, I can see my mum in there somewhere because there's that element of, particularly mums to sons, of that smothering element. We spoke about this before, like you were saying it's not stereotypical to suggest that there's an element of where mums, particularly when it comes to the kids, particularly sons, is the element of that smothering, isn't there? So
whenever you've got parents raising kids, which in some ways it's an interesting theme to have in a book about a guy who's 40. You wouldn't necessarily think, oh, this is about somebody who's been raised by kids, but somebody who is a child being raised. Yeah. But because you're obviously talking about his relationship with his parents, what you get is, so your parents obviously nurture you, right? And they give you, love, and they give you, comfort and warmth, etc. And there's a good side to that. Obviously, you need that when you're particularly when you're very young, very little. But as you grow up, what a parent's job is to do is to basically to release you, to let you go more and more and more. And one of the big difficulties for human beings in general is kind of going through that process from, at the age of maybe 9 or 10, you've got, like you say, the person who was talking about, oh, my kid's now leaving primary school, so they're going from that stage of, they're little, and then maybe about, between maybe 10 and maybe 13, they hit a stage where it's like, right, okay, they're not that little child anymore. And then by the age of kind of, let's say roughly 25, right, that's when your brain's kind of fully developed, right? You kind of need to get to the point by there where you're kind of, you are your own person, and the parent at that point needs to be able to kind of let the child go. Yeah. Quite often I'll say to people, particularly if I'm working therapeutically with young people, I'll say it's really important that you get to the point where by your mid-20s you're kind of able to tell your mum to sod off. So it's like basically what. Don't tell your mum to sod off. Don't tell your mum to sod off. Unless, it's a good soundbite, but what I mean by it is that you need to get to the point where it's like, okay, mum, this is what you think about my life, and that's fine, but I'm an adult, I can make my own choice, I can make my own decisions, and I'm going to make those decisions based upon what's good for me and maybe a partner and maybe my own children, you know, but your opinion as my parent doesn't actually matter to me anymore, because, or certainly not in a way that is not good for me.
So why do you think then his mum in this book is quite, you know, she's not really allowing them to do that to an extent?
No, so he's 40-ish, and there's still the situation where in some ways his mum particularly has not yet released him into the wild, or
she has. And he's back, because I think there's a part where she says, when they have a bit of an argument at the kitchen table, and his mum's at the sink, and she says, I didn't have to worry about you when you were with Heather.
Yeah.
Now I do. Like, I don't want, this age, I don't want to be worrying about you. Yeah. But I'm back worrying about you.
And that's a theme that's not explored in much literature that I know of. Right, you know, because we are now a generation where, you know, maybe in days gone by, you know, whenever divorce was less, and also people's parents didn't live as long, you know, so maybe it was you got to your 20s, you married somebody, and then you were basically, you know, kind of off living your own life, and maybe then, you know, life expectancy was shorter, so parents didn't live as long and they were passed away, etc. So, but now we live in a world where there's quite a lot of people who are maybe in their 40s who have had relationships that haven't worked, you know, and those people will be, like I say, more now than there will be more of those people now than there really ever has been at any point in history. And also, their parents are still alive, because, you know, we now have good healthcare, etc. So people live into their 70s, 80s. So there is this kind of strange dynamic, which is, right, I'm 40 now, but in some ways I'm back to where I was when I was 20, in that I'm looking for my potential future peer bonding person, and my mum is around and is now worrying about me again. So it's probably a fairly common experience, but one not well written about in literature, and that's where he is with his mum.
Definitely,
she's worrying about him again.
And it's like, I think she's obviously smothered them. Like, we'll talk about. Well, we can talk about now, I suppose. Like the other character that's not in the book. Well, Heather's not in the book. She is in the book, but she's not. Can we say why? Flashback. Yeah, I think we can. Like, so stop now. Like I said, if you're still listening, I don't know why. Stop. Remember 199. Come on. Yeah. But so obviously what to find out, which is interesting, because I didn't really mean this to be like an M. Night Shyamalan, you know, twist.
Heather's dead, by the way.
Heather's dead. She dies, but there's not a person who I've spoken to said, yeah, I seen that. Like, everyone was like, at some point I thought he was going to bump into her in the shop, or they would get back together or something. Like, everyone had this in this, like, the whole time. And it's almost, if you read the book again, which I've obviously read like probably 100 times now, it definitely reads differently when you know the outcome.
Yes.
Like, it becomes almost like, not a different book entirely, but I think you get a different take on what's happening.
It's like The Sixth Sense.
Yeah, because the whole time you're thinking, where's Heather? Is Heather going to jump in? Is Heather going to, you know, are they going to get back together? Is she going to bump into her and she's got a kid with someone else? Like, all these things are going to happen that people have said to me that they had in their heads. And then it's like, well, actually, no, she's a ghost. Like, she's a ghost, she's haunting Alfie. You know,
not literally a ghost.
Not literally a ghost. She doesn't appear in any.
You know, like, she appears in flashbacks, and she's died in a flashback.
No, she's not.
And her memory is very much haunting Alfie.
Yeah, not like Yoda.
That's
sitting in the seats, the sofa.
Obi-Wan Kenobi, all blue.
It's a hologram. Yeah. But she does, and I think he's dealing with that. That's an element of grief he's obviously dealing with, as well as, you know, the marriage is that.
Yeah, definitely.
And he feels the guilt because he thinks that his words have pushed her
to the situation where
like that idea of, like, well, I think he says, like, this could have a big play in the million different things that could have been said or done that would have not resulted in her dying. So he feels very much responsible for the actual physical act of her being killed, as well as the fact that he brought the marriage to that point.
So although it was an accident that he wasn't actually involved in, but he was the catalyst that made her physically go to the place where she was. Where that happened.
If he'd said that 10 seconds left, I hadn't said that at all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So all these things he's dealing with. But the other character who's not in the book at all is, of course, his sister. Mm-hmm. Now, his sister's obviously someone that we don't know really much about, other than the odd mention until it comes to the end. And the sister is someone who has really influenced Alfie's life in such a huge way, you know, like,
in a way that he doesn't even know.
No, like, he's never met her, or doesn't remember meeting her anyway. Like, she dies when she's 5 in an accident at the playground.
And Alfie at that point was
like 2.
Was younger, much younger, yeah.
Like he's had this person whereby his mum has smothered him so much, and he says at one point, it's like they're arguing, he rhymes off all the things that he wasn't allowed to do, you know, because his mum was obviously trying to protect him, or protect herself.
Yes.
And
or both.
Yeah. And he's been not a victim of that, but you know what I mean, he's been in the other end of that. And the dad has, as we've not talked about yet, his dad, who is there and present, who thinks that he's all right because, well, I'm here, you know, like I survived, I'm still standing here, you know, like time heals you. You know, he thinks he's been healed because, but actually what he's done, his dad has just held on to the past in a way. And
his dad has never moved on from the moment where his daughter passed away.
Yeah, I think the revelation in the book at the end, you know, where the mum says, you know, your dad never left the hospital.
Yeah.
I always think it's quite a powerful one when I read it back, because there's that element of, well, his dad didn't really, you know, his dad has moved on.
Yeah.
There's some talk about the fact he felt different when Heather was around, and maybe there was that idea of, you know, Heather would have been
moving on and something new.
Yeah, and maybe Heather's obviously as well. I think sometimes when I think about Dad, a lot of this is all off page, but I think about Dad, I think, was Heather the replacement to an extent for his daughter? You know, that she would be roughly this, you know, not a million miles off the same age, and he's shut back down again after she's died. So the dad is he has found a way to survive. And I suppose my question for you is that is that normal, or is that a common thing people do to get on? Shut down?
I was about to say that I know people who have almost experienced almost exactly that thing. In fact, not long before you read the book, you gave me the book, and you had that line saying, "Yeah, your dad never left the hospital." Somebody who I know, I had actually said to them an almost word for word same line. I said to them, you know, one of the things is it seems like you never left that person's funeral.
Yeah,
you know, and again, it was somebody who passed away, you know, 40 years ago. You know, and this individual, had to act in a certain way at the funeral in order to protect their family, and had never changed.
Right.
You know, and had lived that way for 40 years. So they had shut down, but in a very different way. It wasn't with Alfie's dad. It's he becomes a bit of a recluse, you know.
The shed is the manifestation of his. No, first of all, his workplace. He works away in the railways. He's found a job, or he's involved in a job that takes him away from the family. And then he's in the shed. You know, that's his place where he stays in the past almost, because you get to the point where he's making this toy or this fort, which you find at the very end is always the whole time he's inscribed in the bottom of it for his daughter.
Yeah. And I always think that his song should be I'm a Rock, I'm an Island by Simon Garfunkel.
Yeah.
Which is covered by me first and the Gimme Gimmes, who's mentioned in the book.
They are.
So we
used to listen to them quite a lot.
We did, yeah. I'm a rock, I'm an island. I have my books and my poetry to protect me. I'm shielded in my armour.
Right,
you know, because it's all and a rock never. Was it? A rock feels no pain, and an island never cries. Yeah. So I always imagine the dad in his shed, and it's I'm an island. You know, I've got my shed walls and my tools to protect me. So that's very common. It's very, very common. Yeah. And then
and the mum's grief is, she uses it in a different way. His mum's grief, which she tells him at the end. You know, the idea of how do you, like, she's trying to inspire Alfie, I suppose, and try and do the mum thing.
Yeah.
And she says, you know, like he's, you know, what heals you? And she says, well, people heal you.
Yeah.
You know, Alfie's always thought people hurt you.
And there's that dynamic.
You know, people, Alfie's learn people hurt you. People let you down. You let people down. But his mum's like, no, you've got to look at it differently. Like, people, like you saved me.
Yeah.
You didn't even know it. Like, you were 2 years old, and I realised that, you know, I had to, like, life had to move on because I had you.
Yeah.
You know, like I may have not left the hospital either if it wasn't for you.
Yes.
And I think that's cathartic to Alfie in a way, because I think for a long time he's probably, this sister has haunted him again in the sense of this other person.
Yeah.
Because, you know, this comes from, you know, and this isn't divulging, I don't think, family secrets to the world really, because people who are involved are mainly not here, which is the idea came from something quite personal. Now, you know, you said this, we talked about it, is this based on me?
Yeah.
No, but like, of course it's not. Like, I didn't go swimming after a dog and,
yes,
you know,
yes,
or have, you know, an accident in the toilet before trying to have sex with someone.
As far as you're telling us.
I'm not going to broadcast that. But these are things that I just made up. Yeah. They're just stories. But you imbue a lot of your other things into that, and you bring some personal stuff. So one of the things that was probably the closest things that to reality, other than we'll get to you, Jay, in a wee sec, but was like, I can't remember what age it was, but I remember my dad telling me that he had a sister that had died, and I'm not sure he knew much about it, or if he does, he never spoke about it to us. You know, he mentioned it, and I can't remember. I was very young at the time, but I remember I used to look at my gran and my granda, and more so now, but even back then I would think, gee, like, that's what an awful thing, you know, like, how do you go through and make a cup of tea? You know, how do you just sit and watch the telly? How do you go to the bingo? How do you do anything really? But once I became a dad, and I think about that now, that's like multiplied by 1 billion. You know, I think, like, I'd be like, I don't know what, like, Sophie's got the cold.
You're worried about it. Yeah,
totally, like, you know, texting her mum, like, it's all right, you know. And most parents listening will all identify with that, you know, like that element of being worried about your kids. But imagine something like that happen. I can only imagine it, thankfully, you know, and people listening may have unfortunately experienced it. So I'll be careful in what I say. But I was only ever reflecting on how I thought my gran would act. And I look back and I think, God, my gran was just my gran. She just went about her business like anyone else, but I think, how?
And underneath how did she get through that tragedy?
Or was it? Had she just healed herself completely from it? Had she been able to move on from the hurt, or did she go to bed at night? And I was that's made me a bit emotional, so I'm going to be careful. But did she go to bed at night every night thinking about her daughter that she lost? Like, how do people move on? And that fascinated me, that idea. So that's why I thought I want to explore that part in the book.
It's interesting. So people obviously ask you a lot, you know, so are you Alfie? But has anybody asked, but in actual fact, what you're saying there, tell me if this is right, is that you're, you know, in some ways you're actually in some way trying to cast your own imagination into the dad's position, you know, to be like, right, so what's it like to be that guy?
100%. And the mum, like, that's what I was trying to think about, not Alfie, you know, because, like, in reality, like, I've not experienced that personally. I think when you're writing something, you've always got to be very careful that people have experienced these things, and you don't want to write it in a way that feels like not exploitative, but in a way that's doesn't make sense or doesn't resonate with people. So, like, you've not lost a child. Like, like, I don't know. I can't write. I find it difficult to write about because I've not went through that.
But you're, you know,
but I try and think about my gran and granda, who I obviously was extremely close to. And I suppose the thing that it was more my reflections on them, that how did you those questions that I still have to this day, like, how did you go about your daily business? Like, how did that not just haunt you forever? How did you move on? And then when I think about them, I think, you know, I think about how my granda was and things. I think, well, you know, like, maybe they never really did move on completely. Maybe and we'll never know, you know. I don't ever spoke about it. So, but. So that's where that came from, that whole element. And it was an interesting area to mine, because I think it really, like, you know, a bit more about Alfie and a bit more about his mum and dad. And I think ultimately what I love about them, though, is that they're a loving unit, even though the dad's a bit absent. You know,
what you're saying about mum saying people heal people. Obviously, we haven't spoke about Neve yet. You know, so.
Or any of his dates.
Or any of his dates, that's
right, the dates are there mainly for, like, a bit of levity, but also, like, I try to play the dates to reflect on Alfie and not the women he was with. So, like, the like his episode with Mel and where he's, you know, he can't perform, and like, being ghosted and all the things that I've always trying to reflect it back on his vulnerabilities, you know, because, like, putting yourself back in that, we talked about put yourself back in a dating game. Imagine putting yourself back into the intimate situations, you know, at that age, figure out, you know, where maybe you don't look like you did when you were 20, you know.
Speak for yourself.
I was speaking yourself. So like so they were there for that, and then obviously he meets Fiona, who gives him a I think he finds somebody there who's maybe a lot maybe more in common with, but I just don't think he's ever really ready to meet him in the book. I don't think he's really at that point. I think he thinks he does. Page 1 is I'm going to meet someone. Yeah. But I think he's going through the motions, which isn't particularly fair on any of the women that he goes out with. But that's what he's trying to learn. And I think he gets to the point at the end of the book where but Neve.
But wait, so she's the woman that he has, I would say, the closest emotional connection to in the book, if nothing else.
Neve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she doesn't. He doesn't meet her on Hinge.
No, so that's the interesting thing.
Which I quite like that, but why was that? Or was that an intentional choice? Or was it not?
Neve was like Margaret. So let me talk about Neve and Margaret, right? So Neve and Margaret came from the same thing, which was, so the way I write, because I'm not an author as such, like I don't sit with a storyboard or ideas. Like I just sit and write and think what happens next. Now, in this book, I had an idea at the ending. Yeah. But wasn't really sure of what characters would come in and out of the story. Yeah. Neve, like Margaret, was just like was generally going to be just a kind of one-page type person. Right, okay. To try and, I don't know, I can't quite remember the Neve one. I think it was more just to showcase that he was kind of going to push, people might like him and, oh, how are you, and all that. He pushed my weight. But within like 2 lines of her dialogue, I'd pictured this entire person. She forced her entire character. And she forced her way into your mind. Yeah, I knew everything about her. She's my favourite character. Yeah. She's mine, I think, as well. Only because she forms so quickly, like so quickly, and I knew what she would say in every situation very quickly. If there is a divine character. If there is a kind of a sort of celestial being in the book, I think it's Neve. Yeah, like she sees what's going on, and she's also the person, when Mum talks about people will heal people. I think also Neve says to him as well when they're at the breakfast after the big reveal the night before, and she says something like, you'll find the answer and it'll be right in front of your face the whole time. Yep. Like quite literally, she's sitting there, like she's the person, she's the person that's going to help him. But so she was just a kind of like, so I liked that, and I liked exploring, like she's she's more than an intellectual match for him for a start. Like she's above him and then some. Yeah. But she's just a good person, and I just I really loved that character, and right now Margaret came out with something similar where I was in the train station. I thought, right, and he comes out of UG's car and he just can't meet the person. So what do I do? And I thought, right, I'm the guy, if there's 1,000 people and there's one person you think, don't come near me, please don't ask me for the time, I'll be the person. So I thought I'll just write this, and then I was going to take him to W.H. Smith and do a flashback to Heather with him reading. Yeah. And so she does the what time's it, mate, and all that stuff, right? And then I got to the bookshop, and I was always remember it was a Friday night. Okay. And I was sitting with my cup of tea in the couch, and I was stretched out and I was typing it, and I was starting to write this couple of lines about flashback. I thought, no, this is boring. Nobody wants to read about them sitting reading books to each other. Like, what books are like? This is rubbish. So I deleted that. Different way. And I was like, right. And this is what I used to do is, or what I still do, and I'm trying to write, I write questions to myself. So like, what would happen if? And most of the time, the answer's rubbish and you don't want to do anything. But sometimes you hit like a wee gold mine. And I wrote, what would happen if he went back out and he's seen this woman still sitting there? She's still there. And I like the line where he says, when he comes back out and he's like, there's only 2 people in this train station know that she needs to be on that train. Yeah. And the guilt and the sort of person he is, he's like, I have to go over and help this. Yep. She's unconscious and nobody else knows. So he kind of goes over and Margaret grew out of that. And although she's not in the book huge amounts, she became like such a favourite of mine, even though she's in it sparsely, because not because of who she is as such, but just the fact that she shouldn't have really existed. Will there be a prequel trilogy called The Adventures of Margaret, or a spin-off trilogy at some point? I think that could be Margaret. Walk into Glasgow tonight and you will see a Margaret
It's a Friday.
What I would like to do, I think though, is like I'm a wee bit conscious that, and maybe it's a failing on my part, or certainly if it's not a failing, it's something I wanted to tackle. At some point would be like it should be maybe a bit two dimensional. I think, and I'm a wee bit worried that I wouldn't want anybody to think, you know, she's used the stereotype type thing. But what I tried to use her for was in this book was to give UJ someone, you know.
Tell us about UJ.
Well, we can't finish without talking about UJ. So UJ comes from, I say it, and I say this in my acknowledgements. UJ comes from like a real uncle I had, who was, and everyone I knew him. So like people would come from America, friends I had from America when I worked out there, would come and we'd meet him, and he was everyone's favourite person. And like years later, people would message me on like social media and say, "How you doing?" You know, how's your uncle? And because he was just, you met him, and everyone's got an uncle like that, I think, to an extent, you know, or grandfather or somebody who's a bit eccentric, who, when you're a kid, you can't wait for them to come. You know, your day's made when they come. So, like, I had that feeling him, and I was very close to him. So when I was writing Alfie, having someone else, I thought he needed someone in the book. He came to mind, and I suppose it was based a little bit around him. It doesn't look like him to an extent, you know, in terms of appearance and stuff, but some of the things, the idiosyncrasies that they have are quite similar. But he's probably the character, although I say these, they're all my favourites. It's quite hard to say, because you think, actually, I take it back, Yuji's my favourite. But in terms of Yuji, like, I think he's just proper working class gold. And I love that, because I think too often working class people are portrayed in books or in film as, you know, down in the downroads, having a hard time, scratching it, you know, the edges.
Especially Scottish ones.
Especially, totally. And you're like,
they're always hard men.
Like my uncle was as working class they come. But didn't have any of that about him, you know, like he loved life. You know, like he didn't have anything, you know, he had no possessions, didn't own a house, he had a council house, as they say, you know, like, but he loved life, and he was never, you know, like that. And I think sometimes, particularly in Glasgow, we portray the working classes as in films and things, it's always like the hardships, and, you know, and I'm not saying that doesn't happen, because of course it does, you know, of course that is, you know, but it's funny, we always want to portray that. And actually, for me, the working class people that I've, you know, I come from, I myself, I don't think I wouldn't live myself as a working class, to be honest with you, anymore, you know, but I come from a background of working class people, working class families, and they're all like that, you know, like they all had what we say is, it's the old Billy Connolly thing, you know, they say, you know, you came from nothing, and Billy Connolly's like, no, I didn't. I came from something, you know, like that was actually a brilliant life.
That's
it was
right,
great, you know, people that loved me, and, you know, I enjoyed different arts and stuff. He's like, working class people aren't always, he's like, I loved art and I loved music and I loved poetry. Working class people aren't always of that ilk, you know.
So a lot of that,
so that's what I wanted to portray a wee bit as well, because I felt like my real uncle was a good representation of that.
A lot of the characters then, and a lot of the book is about, you know, you've got various bits of life that are kind of not portrayed very well, you know, in other literature. So like you say,
in my opinion,
of course, Scottish working class, is maybe portrayed in a certain way. You've also got the middle-aged man trying to get back in the dating things, maybe portrayed in a certain way,
and he's also not the. He's not the stud, the hunk, the dominating guy. He's actually really vulnerable, and he's someone who is really struggling, and he's not wham bam thank you ma'am, you know, he's got no matches online, he's, you know, not confident in terms of intimacy, like all these things. So
there's a lot of these areas that are maybe not explored widely that are kind of coming together.
And the other thing I wanted to do with Yuji, of course, was like you get the in of the different type of, like you get the other ghost in the story to an extent is the Nana, but that's Yuji's ghost to an extent. This person who he's held on to, you know, and he's loved so much, and the Alfie measures an extent his love for other people against, you know, that he's seen this, you know, his uncle love his Nana,
and he measures it
so
against
much,
it.
and I think there's an element of that as well, you know.
Which brings us to the end of the book. I guess we've only got a couple of minutes left.
Yeah, like,
right.
so
Here we go. Right, I'm going to ask you a question at the end. Right, so right at the end of the book, we get a bit when Alfie's.
I'm not telling you.
Alfie's meeting somebody. Who's he meeting?
I'm genuinely not going to tell you because I'm not sure there is an answer, and I don't. That's not like me sitting on the fence, or I get a jail free card. Like, who do you think it is? Not necessarily you, but like I suppose talking to the reader, who do you think it is? And that's who it is, I suppose. What I would say is that I don't think there's a wrong answer to who he's meeting. He may be meeting nobody of consequence. He may be meeting somebody of consequence. But I suppose it's up to you. I like the idea of. I mean, we didn't talk too much about it, but the end of, like we talked about, like the book's also about hope, and the double-edged sword that is hope. You know, like you can't live with it and you can't live without it. You know, like you live with hope, and it's actually a thing that really oppresses you. And the flip side, hope without it, you don't really have anything. You know, like you need to have some element of things being better. So I suppose Alfie's left a little bit in limbo, a wee bit, or the reader's left a bit in limbo. But then that's life, you know, and I guess that's
and also there's hopefully going to be a sequel.
There's a hope. There's a sequel. We shall see. I wouldn't write a sequel for the sake of writing a sequel. Like, I think there has to be a story to tell, because like the world is littered with awful sequels that never had to happen. I'm not going to name them all because I'll probably get sued. But right. Put it this way, for every sequel that's good and merited, there's probably 100 that were not needed. So I would rather not have a sequel and end it on a slightly ambiguous note. But if there's a story that comes into my head,
take it forward.
I will, absolutely. And you and I can sit here again and discuss it.
Yeah.
So
well done for your first book.
And thank you for joining me and talking about it. I hope that, say to you, the reader or listener just now, I hope you guys enjoyed it. My first book. I said I hope to maybe do something else in the future. And
if you haven't bought it, go and buy it.
I was going to say, if you've not bought it, then I've no idea what you were listening to. You wouldn't have a clue what we're talking about, but I hope you enjoyed it. But if you have bought it, please tell your friends, tell your family. It'll be, hopefully, when you get to the holiday season in particular, it'll be a good poolside read, beachside read, or anytime read. So, but thank you, Dougie, and
thanks very much.
Yeah,
right. Scoular, Unhinged. Buy it on Amazon.
Goodbye.